And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another HSR character guide video. Today we're going to take a look at Argenti, our majestic red-haired character. And today we're taking a look at his whole kit and what he does. And first and foremost, he is a erudition character following the path of erudition. And he's also the physical attribute, which is, I think, one of the new characters. I don't think we've had a first physical 5-star. So this is going to be a pretty good character, as it's going to be one of our first new physical characters. So let's get into his kit. Starting off, his basic attack is just a single hit of damage, so we'll just go past that and go into the skill, which is just a bunch of physical damage to all enemies on the field, similar to Jinyuan, where it's just a bunch of lightning damage. This is just a bunch of physical damage to all enemies. Nothing special here, but the interesting parts start to come in when we get to the ultimate. For the first part of the ultimate, because it's a two-parter here, we've got 4 in this garden. Supreme Beauty bestows. You consume 90 energy and deal physical damage equal to 160 of Argenti's attack to all enemies. Now, it's a bit interesting there that they say consume 90 energy, because that comes into play with the second part of the ultimate. The second part of his ultimate is jumping down to merit bestowed in my garden. It consumes 180 energy this time and deals physical damage equal to 280% of Argenti's attack to all enemies, and then further deals damage for 6 extra times, with each time dealing physical damage equal to 95% of Argenti's attack to a random enemy. Now, that is kind of an interesting concept that they've introduced with Argenti's ultimate, where it has 2 different modes and 2 different energy consumptions, meaning that if you want to play him in a different playstyle, or if the situation calls for a different value of ultimate, you can kind of use it accordingly. But do be warned that his, obviously the higher energy consumption one is going to net you the much higher damage, as it's 280 plus 95 times 6, and technically if you use that against single target enemies, you can get some pretty juicy damage. As for his talent, Sublime Object, for every enemy hit when Argenti uses his basic attack, skill, or ultimate, he then regenerates Argenti's energy by 3 and grants him a stack of Ascend, which then increases his crit rate by 2.5. This effect can stack up to 10 times, which is actually a very, very good talent just by itself. Energy recharge and crit rate increase is extremely powerful, and the more enemies you hit, obviously the higher the crit rate. So it does kind of focus him in on being an AoE character, regardless, a very, very powerful single talent. And jumping down to the technique, Manifesto of Purest Virtue. After using the technique, enemies in a set area are inflicted with daze for 10 seconds. Enemies in daze will not actively attack the team, and then when attacking a dazed enemy to enter combat, deal physical damage to all enemies equal to 80% of Argenti's attack, and regenerate his energy by 15. Just an absolute decent technique, nothing too special about it. It's kind of like Sampo's if you want. It's nothing too special, but you have a bit of energy recharge there. And lastly, for his standard kit, we've got the bonus abilities. We've got number 1, Courage. Deal 15% more damage to enemies whose HP is 50% or less. So he's a bit more of an execute character, which is always great to see. Going on to number 2, which is Generosity. When enemy targets enter battle, immediately regenerate 2 energy for yourself, which is a bit of an interesting bonus ability, kind of along the lines of, if you have a continuous fight, you kind of get energy all the time. Obviously, at the start of the battle, you'll always get a certain amount of energy, depending on the amount of enemies that you're fighting. But if it's a continuous fight, Argenti will just naturally regenerate energy as the enemies come in after wave, which is quite cool. And then last one, bonus ability 3, Piety. At the start of a turn, immediately gain 1 stack of Ascend, and as we know, Ascend is that bit of energy recharge, or I believe it rather, sorry, is the crit rate, which is a part of that energy recharge talent, but you just get 1 stack of Ascend, which is always useful. And overall, Argenti's actually a pretty good character. Let's not like beat around the bush. This is actually pretty powerful. The reason for this is that there's not many physical characters in the game. We've only got Sushang, Natasha, and Clara from my understanding. I might be missing one, I think it's Luca. But this is our next physical main DPS. He is erudition, but unlike Jinyuan, who specializes in only AoE damage, Argenti does have a bit of a single target alternative. So Argenti baseline is going to be our next best physical DPS, and his playstyle seems to be kind of interesting where you have a bit of diversity between your ultimate energy consumption. You consume 90 to do a bit lower damage, or you consume 180 to deal mega damage, but it also could be used for single target. And then he's got a very powerful talent with the whole crit rate boosting, which I always love to see crit rate boosting through talents and bonus abilities, because it means that the character is going to be slightly more lenient on their stat requirement through relics and planar ornaments. So overall, I'd say Argenti is going to be a great character, very good DPS, but as we all know, constellations make a man cry. So let's get into those. Starting off with Eidolon 1, a Lacuna in Kingdom of Aesthetics. Each stack of Ascend additionally increases your crit damage by 4%, which is, as we know, you can get 10 Ascend stacks, so you get 40% crit damage at the high end, which is always powerful, as well as getting those 2.5% crit rate per stack. Essentially, E1 makes him very stat lenient, which you always love to see. Overall, very powerful E1 rather. Number 2, a Gates Humility. If the number of enemies on the field equals to 3 or more when using the ultimate, your attack is increased by 40% for one turn, just making your ultimate deal a lot more damage, and anything subsequently after in that turn also deal a lot more damage, which is very powerful so far. Eidolon 4, Trumpet's Dedication. At the start of the battle, gain 2 stacks of Ascend and increase the maximum stack limit of the talent's effect by 2 to a total of 12 stacks now, which does increase the value of your E1, and generally your stat leniency becomes even better for crit rate, which is incredible to see. Very good Eidolon. And then lastly, E6, your Resplendence. When using your ultimate, ignore 30% of the enemy target's defense. Wow. Argenti is ridiculously powerful with Eidolons. Now, these are all very simple Eidolons, which is why they are probably very powerful, and I like to see the short form Eidolons and talents. Now, it's very hard to come to a conclusion what's the highest value. Let's be absolutely real. 30% ignoring of enemies' defense from E6 is probably the strongest thing in the game, as that's what you kind of want nowadays. I've been seeing a lot of the rise of the Quantum Relic set, which ignores defense on quantum weak enemies, being very best in slot for new DPS that aren't even quantum characters. So defense ignoring is very powerful, but E6 is a bit of a tall order. I honestly think the character at E0 is pretty good. Obviously E1 and obviously E2 do massive damage boosting, but the character at E0 is a powerhouse in and of himself. He has massive damage, he has a bit of stat leniency through the talent, and he also has single target and AoE potential depending on how you want to play him. But if I was to give a bit of value, E2 would be the highest value, because E3 is just a talent boost, and then E4 increases your stat leniency, but it's nothing too crazy. It also increases your tempo a bit, obviously. But let's say E1 to E2 is his best value, but I personally, if I was getting him, E0 is probably where I'd stay at. Going on to Light Cones, again, simple answer, his best in slot is going to be his signature, which is an instant before a gaze. This one plays obviously to his strong suits with increasing crit damage by 36% baseline, and then when the wearer uses their ultimate, increase the ultimate damage based on their max energy. Each point of energy increases the ultimate damage by 0.36%, up to 180 points of energy. So, because of his high energy cost of 180 on his second ultimate, you'll pretty much be getting incredible value just from equipping this. So this is going to be his easy best in slot for the 5-star category. Another good variant, if you do have it before Dawn, is absolutely fine. Again, crit damage increase by 36%, and then skill and ultimate damage increase by 18%, flatline, which is always great. As for the Somnus Corpus effect at the end here, it's not that useful as you don't have follow-up attack damage on Argenti. And as for Into the Milky Way, which is Himiko's signature, that one is very universal, so you can use that practically on any. So for the 5 stars, that's pretty much the gist of it. All of them work for the most part. As for the 4 stars, this actually gets a bit more intense, I guess, maybe. A very good one is Today is Another Peaceful Day. Now, I want to say, first and foremost, this is, I believe, the Battle Pass light cone, so this is not going to be available to everyone. But the reason I want to make a suggestion for this one is because of the effect being practically the same as Argenti's signature, just minus the crit damage effect. After entering battle, increase the wearer's damage based on their max energy. Damage increases by 0.19% per point of energy, up to 160. It's pretty much Argenti's light cone, just at lower capacity and minus that crit damage. Now, this one being the Battle Pass weapon, just taking a quick look at R5, it does scale to 0.39% per energy, up to 160, which you could argue is higher value, but that is a different case. Another good one is going to be Make the World Clamor, as this is a ultimate damage based light cone, and Argenti is an ultimate damaging unit. His ultimate is his core part of his kit, and this one also increases your energy by 20 at the start of a battle, and ultimate damage by 32%. It's going to be essentially one of his better ones for 4-star category. And the last one, I believe the seriousness of breakfast is going to be just absolutely universal on most characters. Increases the wearer's damage by 12, and then for every enemy defeated by the wearer's attack increases by 4%, stacking up to 3 times. Just a bit of a universal one. But the one that I'll recommend the most is going to be Make the World Clamor, as it is just a flat ultimate damage boost at 32% at R5 and 64% at R1, and then R5 is 64%. So this one's going to be universally probably his best one, as it's the most amount of percentage ultimate damage. But obviously, if you have a 5-star variant, by all means, use that. And lastly, coming down to gears, we've got recommended sets and whatnot. Now, Hakush makes some very good recommendations, and the easiest one, and probably the strongest one for him, is going to be the Champion of Streetwise Boxing for the Relic set, as it is the only physical set we have right now, and Argenti has no specific style of attacking. It's not follow-up, it's not low HP, it's nothing like that. So it's just going to be his best one for the time being, as it gives physical and attack increase with the whole 4-piece. And Inert Cell Soto will most likely be his best one. I don't doubt that Inert Cell Soto will get replaced by something in the future, but for now, as it gives ultimate damage increase by 15% and a crit rate boost of 8%, it's going to be his best for now. It might change in the near future. Musketeer of Wild Wheat is universal, it works. Longevous Disciple, I wouldn't recommend. Space Sealing Station is universal, as it's just 24% attack boost, and Celestial Differentiator is just a crit damage boost. Most of these work just fine, but I would recommend Streetwise Boxing and Inert Cell Soto for the time being, as they are just going to give you the most bang for your buck. As for the substats, crit rate is obviously going to be the big one, but the crit rate on the chest piece is interchangeable if you get good crit rate through substats, as we also have to remember his talent gives crit rate by itself, so he'll be able to have a bit of crit rate leniency and may be able to go for crit damage in certain situations. Boots is obviously going to be speed, as it's just generally going to be what you want on all your DPS characters, or just most of your characters. It's very rare that you'll want attack percentage or anything else. Speed is just generally going to be the better boot stat. Physical damage and attack percent for the planar ornaments, it's kind of obvious he's a main DPS, you kind of want damage. Pretty straightforward. Physical set, Inert Cell Soto, stats are pretty good. Now, as for this actual last section, it's going to be kind of talking about his character compositions and who you would pair him up with. Now, we have to remember that Argenti is a physical DPS, and he's a main DPS, at least in my opinion. He doesn't have any kind of sub-DPS effects or any kind of boosting or anything along those lines, so he's a physical main DPS. And I'm not going to really beat around the bush, you just kind of combo him with buffers. Bronya is going to be a great buffer. If you have any other Harmony characters, they'll be great buffers. Ting Yun is fine. Yukong might work. Don't quote me on Yukong, because Yukong's a bit of an iffy character. Paler for some more defense shredding, or something along those lines. So, just characters that boost his damage. It's not, I'm not going to beat around the bush. He's not a specific character. He doesn't need a specific thing. For example, a specific thing would be comboing Topaz with Jing Yuan, as they kind of play off each other. There's nothing like that with Argenti. You just kind of want damage boosters or enemy defense shredders. Try to combo a healer, obviously, if you can. If you have a healer available to you, go for that. But if not, well, just try to DPS through all the enemy's HP before they DPS through yours. Pretty simple and straightforward character, and hopefully this video did help you guys. If it did, like and sub, and I'll catch you guys in the next guide.